It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
These are, indeed, strange days on planet Earth. And if you're alarmed by what you see unfolding around you now, you definitely won't like what's coming. Almost none yet comprehend the gravity and immediacy of our collective dilemma. The coming weeks and months will make all but impossible to hide what few are yet willing to face. Welcome to the Bad News Broadcast. Let's get started with this. From multiple sources, wildfire smoke makes the world cooler. Yes, it does. Temporarily and toxically, exactly as Geoengineeringwatch.org has tried to bring to light for 16 years. And now the so-called climate science community is having to admit to this because they can't hide it anymore. And the motives behind the incineration of northern latitude forests are beginning to come to light. Please take a time to view the shocking atmospheric smoke coverage map thumbnail image for this broadcast on the homepage of Geoengineeringwatch.org. Once this post goes up Saturday afternoon, you'll be shocked. Peer-reviewed science studies have actually advocated for the intentional incineration of forests in order to provide temporary toxic cooling on a planet that climate engineering has helped to push toward total meltdown. They're trying to mimic the temporary toxic cooling effects of a volcanic eruption and what follows those temporary toxic cooling effects. An even worse protracted warming, damage to the planet's life support systems, the list goes on and on. And yes, that's how desperate the controllers and the climate engineers actually are. If you don't believe it, please take the time to review one of our most important short video reports, Wildfires Serve Geoengineering Agenda, and you'll probably have to look somewhere besides Google because that corporation of cowards is doing everything they can to hide data from geoengineeringwatch.org. Next from UK Guardian, let's add this. Researchers call for urgent exploration of methods to cool Earth. Ideas include, they say, injecting sulfates into the atmosphere or lighting forests on fire, prepping those forests to burn with such ferocity. And that's the key point here. It's not the source of ignition in question here. It is what is setting the template for these forests to burn with such ferocity, and that is absolutely positively climate engineering. Long list of factors in that equation. Please, again, review the engineering wildfire section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org to learn a lot more. They say put sulfates into the atmosphere to reflect sunlight, but this could, they say, do more harm than good. You think? What could go wrong with filling Earth's atmosphere 24/7 with 40 to 60 million tons annually of toxic nanoparticles, heavy metals, polymers, surfactants? What could possibly go wrong with that, right? Question, for how much longer will Matrix Media pump out reports like this that continue to pretend climate engineering operations aren't actually raging in our skies, as they have been for decades, actually, drying out our forests, just mentioned that, disrupting the hydrological cycle, destroying the ozone layer, contaminating virtually everything, every breath we take, every drink of water, every bite of food? How do the sane among us cope with the fact that the vast majority would rather ignore their lying eyes and gulp down the official denial as opposed to facing reality and looking up? Those that lack the courage and fortitude to fully face the truth continue to parrot excuses for their denial, like, quote, there's no way they could hide jet spraying operations on such a scale, end quote. Yes, correct. They're not hidden. They're shockingly obvious and inarguable. What is hidden? What is dysfunctional? What is programmed to the point of eyes wide shut willful blindness is the majority consensus clinging to a pretend reality as the ship goes down by the day, aka planet Earth. Pressing on, more climate engineering, aka weather warfare absurdities. Recap from last week. From Newsweek, rare summer winter storm to strike with 2 feet of snow. Stop and think about that. For all those that have been roasting of late, even in Alaska, covered last week with the first ever heat warning, and with some sources citing heat indexes in Alaska up to 110 degrees, Montana gets 2 feet of chemical snow. Let's add this from the Weather Channel. A winter storm will blanket parts of Montana and the northern Rockies the first weekend of summer. Does everyone remember the Gulf Coast snowstorms a few short months ago? Blizzards in New Orleans and Florida? Yes, chemical ice nucleation operations created blizzards on the Gulf Coast while it was above freezing and raining in much of the polar regions, the Arctic, Alaska, Greenland, Iceland, Siberia, above freezing and raining while it was blizzarding in New Orleans and Florida. From USA Today, record-smashing heat wave to scorch tens of millions. Again, while Montana is getting 2 feet of snow. The report says this level of heat risk is known for being rare and or long duration with little to no overnight relief. In this USA Today report, it's important to consider the no overnight relief part. What's that mean? It means the heat is not escaping back into the atmosphere. Why not? Because we filled our fishbowl with heat-trapping gases and climate engineering heat-trapping particles. Heat gets in, doesn't get out. Very, very bad equation. We're about to find out how bad soon. Much to unpack when combining the winter storm warnings in Montana and the meltdowns taking place in the rest of the country and most of the rest of the world. First, a few more headline puzzle pieces from ABC News. Central Park hits temperature record last seen in 1888 as extreme heat hits eastern U.S. I would bet that 1888 temperature is false because they always find something in the distant past to make people believe, oh, it's happened before, so it must be okay. Again, even the global temperature rise charts are absolutely falsified. They show the baseline slicing across the center of the total rise in temperatures. That's cutting off half the rise and putting it below the baseline. That's called lying. Again, falsification of temperatures to the downside, not the upside. We are likely to pass 3.5 C of warming from baseline right now, today. From Instant Weather, Ontario, Canada. Heat index values have soared well into the mid to upper 40s, and in parts of the greater Toronto area, it's feeling close to 50 degrees C. Stop and ponder that report. Heat index is pushing over 120 degrees Fahrenheit in parts of Canada, while there's a winter storm warning in Montana with 2 feet of snow. Yeah, that makes so much sense. From ABC News, dangerous heat wave. Several East Coast cities break June records. Multiple cities in the Northeast baking in the current heat wave experienced their hottest June temperatures on record Tuesday afternoon, including Boston, Providence, Rhode Island, and Newark and New Jersey. And keep in mind, when it comes to a heat record over a given geographic area, they'll take maybe a dozen records. If it was a chemically induced record cold scenario with surface flash freezing, they would take 10 times more temperature records because that skews the perception of the true state of the planet. They have so many ways of doing that. Here's another alarming factor to ponder regarding the ABC News report. At 4 a.m. in the morning, Wednesday of this week, Boston temperatures were 85 degrees. Again, think about that. In the middle of the night, 85 degrees in Boston in June. The following night, New York City was at the same temperatures. I checked them. Question, why is geoengineeringwatch.org the only news source we know of that's desperately trying to expose the chemical ice nucleation winter weather warfare factor? Why are too many self-proclaimed online truth-tellers pretending the temperature whiplash flash cooldowns that are now the norm, often with baseball and softball size hail? Why are they pretending that somehow that's a sign of global cooling, or even more absurd, a coming ice age? What planet are these people on? And how exactly can they claim to be fighting against climate engineering while simultaneously covering the tracks of the climate engineers by pretending completely manipulated, engineered weather events are just nature? Call them out. Hold them accountable. The same disinformation sources are also all too often pushing the just jet exhaust lie narrative, again while pretending to be in the fight against climate engineering sprayed dispersions. What a contradiction. And all the while they're pandering for your donations. No shortage of con artists and disinformation actors, and that includes matrix media so-called reporters that do nothing but whatever their controllers ask them to do. They are criminal accomplices to the crimes of covering up climate engineering. It's up to us to use our God-given sense of reason, logic, and eyesight. Up-close film footage of jet spraying dispersions, nozzles visible turning on and off, end of debate. Sprayed climate engineering element dispersions, 40 to 60 million tons a year of toxic nanoparticles, not jet exhaust. Remember and consider that the climate engineering particles trap more heat than they deflect, with ionosphere heater-induced high-pressure heat domes further amplifying the planetary meltdown. With that in mind, from Metro UK, over 150 people sick in mass casualty event at graduations amid heat wave. They say more than 150 people at 2 outdoor high school graduation ceremonies fell ill in a, quote, mass casualty event. For the record, this report is the slightest snapshot of what's taking place around the world, of what's coming, of what's going to get worse at blinding speed, with weather warfare operations further fueling the overall fire. It's not the only problem. It's a this and that scenario. All forms of human activity that affect the energy balance of the planet are a part of the problem. Intentionally interfering with the planet's life support systems for purposes of power and control is the biggest part of the problem of all. If climate engineering operations are not soon fully exposed and halted, nothing else will matter. Nothing. No cause, no concern, no future plans, nothing. All moot points. Wait and see. This is Dane Wigington. You're listening to the weekly installment of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News Report, the end of the world as we know it, broadcast brought to you by Geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of global climate engineering operations, aka weather warfare. For those new listeners on our radio broadcasts, if you want an A to Z on this most dire subject, please take the time to go to geoengineeringwatch.org and view our documentary, The Dimming, 26 million plus views and counting, and you will understand this issue much more completely, and you will understand why it is the fight we must win, or all is lost. What about the UV radiation? Anyone that's even slightly awake can feel the intense burning on their skin and on surfaces. Geoengineering is destroying the ozone layer. It's getting worse by the day. We are near functional collapse of the ozone layer now. It's killing planktons, killing insects, killing foliage, killing crops. And people ignore their own senses because the official UV reading doesn't indicate the severity of what's bombarding us on the surface, because the UV readings that are taken only take into account half the UVB spectrum and none of the UVC spectrum. You can't disclose what you're not even metering for. Entire system is set up to mask the true severity of what's unfolding so they can try to keep the population from panicking until the last possible moment while they continue to do the damage in our skies. If the wake-up doesn't occur soon, game over. From the UK Guardian, more mind-numbing stupidity from the so-called climate science community. Question, are they laughing it up behind closed doors after publishing moronicism like this new headline? Here it is. Mirrors in space and underwater curtains. Can technology buy us enough time to save the Arctic ice caps? What's some of their other suggestions? Covering the polar ice deposits with tarps. Wow, what a great idea. We're going to cover whole continents, in the case of Antarctica, with tarps. Or there's the 10 million wind-powered water pump so-called proposal from the so-called climate science community to pump cold seawater up in the Arctic. How much carbon fuel would it take to build 10 million wind-powered water pumps? And when they pump that cold water up, warm water replaces it on the seafloor, which causes methane, frozen methane deposits to release, which migrates to the water column into the atmosphere, covers the planet like a layer of glass. Game over. Game over. Methane over a 10-year time horizon traps 120 times more heat than CO2. None of that taken into account. The so-called science community at this point is nothing more than a ludicrous distraction from reality, whose job it is to keep the public pacified until the moment of impact. No courage, no honor. I hope that changes. I hope some in the so-called ranks of academia band together, stand up, and tell the truth while it can still make a difference. From the Anchorage Daily News, fires near Fairbanks, Alaska, trigger evacuation orders as lightning sparks more new blazes around Alaska. A lightning fire near Fairbanks that triggered evacuations was among dozens of new wildland blazes sparked around Alaska by thunderstorms, wind, and high temperatures. Keep in mind, climate engineering setting the template for these fires to burn with such ferocity, including establishing the conditions that facilitate much more dry lightning strikes. When you ionize the atmosphere, you make it more electrically conductive. When you've dried out the foliage by cutting off the precipitation for weeks or months, you create the conditions that spawn more wildfires. And back to the stated cooling effect of wildfire smoke that is seen by those in power as a benefit. Let's just burn up the last of the planet's life support systems to temporarily and toxically cool the planet. And oh, by the way, it's making the population sicker and dumber by the day because they have to breathe it all. That's another benefit to those in power. With that in mind, let's add this from nautilus.us. The weird cooling effect of wildfires. That's the headline. Let's keep going. Smoke and dust from fires could block the sun, but that's not necessarily a good thing. That's their report. That's their words. Really, you think that's not a good thing? No more forests, never coming back, and an atmosphere full of toxic smoke with climate engineering operations spraying on top of the smoke canopy, which we have recorded at Geoengineering Watchdog. It's in the dimming. There's no benevolent purpose to spray toxic accelerant particles, they're incendiaries, on top of a smoke bank for an existing wildfire. That is a completely malevolent action or operation. This report continues, according to new models, the smoke from all the wildfires could actually dampen global warming. They continue. Warming is more than offset by the net cooling effect that the smoke and other aerosols create. What other aerosols are they referring to? The kind that are being spewed out of geoengineering jet aircraft on top of the smoke banks. They say fires release smoke, carbon dioxide, methane, and all sorts of other pollutants, including sometimes toxic substances. Not sometimes, all the time. Again, what are they spraying on top of these smoke banks? This report of the cooling effect of wildfires continues with this. Aerosols brighten clouds and prevent some of the sun's heat from ever reaching the surface. This even manages to keep some of the sea ice in the Arctic from melting as a result. They then say the ice lasts longer and stays thicker deeper into the summer and fall than it otherwise would have, which leads to even more cooling in the winter compared to what most other climate models suggest. So many holes in this conclusion, just designed to pacify populations as if we should rejoice at wildfire smoke cooling anything, which it doesn't. So how's all that forest fire incineration smoke working to preserve glacial ice? Not so well. From MSN, scientists make dire warning while studying massive glaciers that are turning into Swiss cheese. We have to start preparing, end quote. That's their words, not mine. Wildfire smoke destroys the ozone layer. Obviously, we're losing forests that will never come back. The cooling effect of those forests is gone forever. The soot eventually settles down in the ice, turning it dark, which makes it absorb more thermal radiation. When they find scientists to push this, they're simply covertly trying to sell climate engineering and burning forests and all the insane actions they are taking. They're even discussing, as I've brought up in numerous broadcasts, what they see as a, quote, benefit of a nuclear exchange to put enough particulate matter in the air to slow the warming of the planet. We are on a runaway train of total insanity at this point. The inmates are definitely running the asylum. Let's keep going. From severeweather.eu, rare stratospheric warming waves emerge over South Pole with unusually strong anomalies around the polar vortex. All of these sources of information are playing the part of covering the crimes of climate engineering. All of them. Their paychecks, their pensions, their grants, all depend on them towing the line. So about the so-called polar vortex. This question, is the Antarctic ionosphere heater installation completely connected to the phenomenon just described in the severe weather headline? It is inseparable from it. The degree to which those in power are tearing apart the planet's natural life support systems cannot be overstated, and we will all pay the price if it's allowed to continue. Whatever you're focused on, whatever cause, whatever concern, whatever pastime, whatever leisure, we're not going to be here much longer if we don't stand up together and face this onslaught against the planet. Moving on, next headline, more pretending from the so-called climate science community that climate engineering isn't raging in our skies. From newscientist.com, why geoengineering is no longer a complete taboo for scientists. The report states geoengineering comes in many forms and the risks and potential benefits vary widely. But many researchers now feel it's time to investigate this controversial idea. Think about the depths of the insanity that we live in, that the entirety of the so-called climate science community can pretend that climate engineering is just a, quote, proposal that might be deployed someday, and there are no benefits. It's all bad. When you temporarily hide a problem at the cost of making it exponentially worse, that's not a benefit. Just like the pharmaceutical industrial complex mentality for the treatment of the human body. This is a death sentence for our planet if it's allowed to continue, and they are using these operations as a form of covert weather warfare, period. It's all about power and control, not benevolence. It's about using weather as a weapon and masking the true severity and immediacy of damage done to the climate, the planet's life support systems until the moment of impact, which draws now perilously near. The repackaged official denial of climate engineering sprayed dispersions continues in many circles with the pushing of the just jet fuel, aka just jet exhaust, that continues to be propagated by those committed to harming the credibility of the anti-climate engineering cause. For the record, Maha everything means absolutely nothing unless or until the toxic climate engineering dispersions are fully exposed and halted. And again, no, it isn't jet exhaust, covering entire horizons all over the world. Side note that needs mentioning about Geoengineering Watch imposter sites. If I'm not an administrator or I don't belong to the group, it isn't me. It isn't the real Geoengineering Watch, period. Side note mentioned too, just posted at geoengineeringwatch.org, a must-view 2.5-minute stop climate engineering video statement from an extremely courageous state representative from South Carolina, Lee Gilreath. I'm extremely honored to call Lee my friend. He deserves our full support. Please view and share his gloves-off statement to expose and halt the climate engineering insanity, appealing to our military brothers and sisters, and he served in the military, appealing to them to stand up and deal with this threat. They took an oath to stand against all threats, foreign and domestic. This is a domestic threat. It's up to our military brothers and sisters to stop blindly following orders, and Lee Gilreath is calling them to do exactly that, to band together, to stand up. Lee is a stellar example to elected officials everywhere. This link should be sent to every single one of them. Back to the demise of planet Earth from phys.org. Global warming is changing cloud patterns. That means more global warming. This is an ongoing and worsening scenario, the gravity of which cannot be overstated. It's part of Venus syndrome, and that's not a metaphor. The report says at any given time, about 2/3 of Earth's surface is covered by clouds. Overall, they make the planet much cooler than it otherwise would be without them. Natural cloud cover is being diminished, dispersed, hampered. Climate engineering, aerosol dispersions, and frequency transmissions are the core part of the problem. The phys.org report continues, but as Earth gets warmer, mostly due to the rise in greenhouse gases, am I saying that's not a factor? No, I'm not saying that. When you burn 100 million barrels plus of carbon fuel a day, 26 million tons of coal a day, cut down the forest, pave the planet, poison the oceans, that's all a part of the problem. But when you intentionally fill the skies with cloud diminishing, hydrological cycle destroying nanoparticles and manipulating those particles with frequency transmissions, you are pounding the final nails into our collective coffins, and it's all being done for purposes of power and control. This article states, and they're blaming it all on only carbon fuels, part of the problem, but not the biggest core part. And they say that this might already be causing more warming, adding to the greenhouse heat boost and changing clouds even more. There's no could, there's no may, there's no might, is. In Northern California, where I live, throughout this spring and early summer season, we're seeing about 1/10 of the clouds we should see. And people don't remember that because it's come on so slowly. Most people don't remember what happened 10 or 20 years ago. Oh, it's always been this way. No, it hasn't. No, it hasn't. Or the forest would be alive and not dying. Every single fir tree, the predominant tree in Western North American forest, is in some stage of death or dying. Every single one. Peer-reviewed study proves that. I started to warn about this in 2008. Why has it taken the climate science community so long to catch up? The first full-page newspaper ad in a Northern California newspaper I paid for out of pocket at the cost of thousands of dollars I did in 2008. Why has it taken the so-called climate science community so long to catch up? Over the past few years, the report says the world's average temperature has increased more than climate scientists were expecting. I've said that also over 27 years, 16 of those years with geoengineeringwatch.org. It's not as bad as we're being told. It's exponentially worse than we're being told. They're trying to pacify populations till the moment of impact. Climate engineering is a part of that. When there's a snowstorm in New Orleans, it can't be that warm, right? Who cares if it's a chemical snowstorm and it was 80 degrees the day before and 80 degrees the day after? Who cares? Look at the snow. Look at the headlines. We need to be a lot smarter than that. A feedback loop, the report says. In short, the global warming induced by increased greenhouse gases changes the major wind system on Earth. This, in turn, reduces the area of highly reflective clouds, leading to additional warming. Warming changes wind patterns, which changes cloud patterns, which results in more warming. This is what we call a positive feedback loop. Positive doesn't mean good, by the way. In the climate system, warming leads to more warming. Yes, it does. About 50 plus feedback loops already triggered. Can't just shut them off. And about changing upper level wind patterns, single greatest factor, climate engineering, ionosphere heater, weapons of mass destruction, changing atmospheric pressure zones, manipulating upper level wind currents, the reflective particulates affecting convection, which also affects wind currents. The single greatest planetary life support disrupting factor of all by far is climate engineering. There is no legitimate discussion of climate anything from any perspective without dealing with that first and foremost. That's not a denial of the fact that we've been abysmal stewards of planet Earth. It is simply to say we must deal with the biggest hole in the bottom of the boat first, or the boat sinks. Nothing else matters. From thehill.com, Earth is absorbing too much sunlight. It's waking a climate giant. Again, stated purpose, solar radiation management, to make the planet more reflective. How's that working out? When it's diminishing the actually reflective natural clouds in exchange for the not so reflective, ozone destroying, hydrological cycle disrupting, toxic geoengineering sprayed particulate clouds that anyone who's not clinically blind should easily be able to recognize the filthy, dirty, hazy mess that sometimes surrounds the few remaining natural cumulus clouds there are, at least in Northern California, in our region. And the damage is so great to the flora, including our forests, they're not producing cloud cover anymore as they should. Again, VPD, vapor pressure deficit. When you change atmospheric chemistry to this degree, and that includes all the burning of carbon fuels, that's a part of the problem. Climate engineering, an even bigger part, but it's an all-the-above equation. Denying parts of the equation doesn't make our cause more credible. It diminishes that credibility. It's an all-the-above equation. Bottom line, we lose the planet's albedo, we're done. Venus, over. Game over. And that is exactly where we're headed. They say albedo loss causes about 4 times more immediate warming than carbon dioxide emissions. That's true. Albedo loss is not a subtle background shift. It's becoming a dominant driver of global warming. We are losing our natural cloud cover. Again, single greatest factor is climate engineering. Loss of clouds drives a dangerous feedback loop as warming vaporizes clouds. More solar radiation reaches the planet's surface, evaporating even more water. This increases water vapor, a powerful greenhouse gas, which traps more heat. More water vapor combined with less cloud cover causes further warming and worsens extreme weather. Again, there's no weather anything that can be separated from climate engineering. None. And that's why if we force this issue to the full light of day, a shockwave will ensue around the world as populations everywhere realize what their governments have done to them without their knowledge and consent. That's the pitchforks and torches moment, and that includes every single coward in matrix media, every single coward meteorologist that's pretending this isn't going on. All of them should be considered, by a justifiably enraged population, they should all be considered criminal accomplices to the cover-up of the climate engineering crimes. All of them, every single one. The report says a hotter world gets darker, a darker world gets hotter, Albedo is the awakening of the climate giant. Yes, it is. Venus syndrome. How long have I been talking about this on this broadcast? How many years? Carbon emission reduction alone can't prevent climate tipping points. Of course not, which are already activating at 1.5 degrees Celsius. They say, no, we're past 3.5 now. And by the way, that's the threshold at which the science consensus is that the human race is functionally extinct. That doesn't mean we all die. It means that we are not going to survive in this trajectory. That's what it means, and that is the path we're on. They say the warming decimates coral reefs, reduces ice, permafrost without a brighter Earth. These cascading effects will be unstoppable. It's called cascading collapse. It's underway right now. The report continues, concerted action to restore albedo could become a fast, safe, economic, and acceptable strategy to slow warming, buying time to manage the longer-term problem of greenhouse gases. How's that going? How is solar radiation management going after 80 years and we are circling the drain at the cusp of planetary omnicide? We are through the guardrail, sailing through the air. You can pump the brakes all you want. We're going to the bottom of the canyon. The report says, yet albedo remains almost entirely absent from climate strategies under the Paris Accord, the failure to prioritize. Why is that? Because all the climate conferences have nothing to do with reducing business as usual. It's smoke and mirrors. Behind closed doors, they're pressuring countries to actively or passively participate in the climate engineering insanity. That's why it's not in any of their models. They don't want you to know. That's why the UV readings are false. That's why the temperature readings are underreported. Everything is being done to mask the severity and immediacy of what's unfolding from the population, including massive extinction, insects, wildlife, fisheries, forests, everything. Feed the population bread and circus until the moment of impact. And so far, it's working all too well. The report says we must protect the albedo layer just as we repaired the planet's ozone layer. While the ozone layer is at functional collapse, but people believe it. Well, I read it in an article, right? I believe it. I don't care if the sun is burning the hell out of my skin and surfaces. Some science report from some matrix media source says it's all better. So I guess it's all better, even if my head's on fire. We need populations to snap out of their coma fast or we're done. They say climate researchers have proposed technologies, including marine cloud brightening, stratospheric aerosols. Look up. This is just becoming ludicrous that every week the so-called climate science community can pump this out. Populations are watching football games and eating pizza and pretending that their elected political puppet's going to make a difference. No, it's not. We're about to hit the wall at full velocity. Buckle up. It's coming. And by the way, about that polar sea ice, record low. That's the planet's air conditioners, record low right now, and the mass is even lower. There's extent, which is surface area, and there's mass. And to hide that, I've been over this many times, official sources now consider Arctic ice pack to be any area of the Arctic Ocean that's 15% slush or more. Isn't that still 85% ocean? How do you call that an ice pack? But they do to mask how badly compromised it is already. We are hurtling toward impact. From AVMA, that's the American Veterinary Medical Association, mass honeybee collapse may compromise U.S. agriculture. What do they get could, may, might here? If you have no bees, you have no pollinators, there will be a collapse of agriculture. It's not a could, may, might equation. They say commercial beekeepers across the United States earlier this year discovered their colonies of honeybees in near or total collapse without explanation. They don't have any explanation. I delivered to Northern California beekeepers, the head people, peer-reviewed study. I hand-delivered it to them that made clear aluminum was killing the bees. Symptoms of Alzheimer's and dementia in the bees, they can't even find their way back to the hive. Do these people do anything with that? No, nothing. Because to them it feels better to ram their heads into the sand and pretend it isn't so. While the bees completely collapse. The report says it's the worst bee die-off in history. That's an understatement because we lost 60 to 70+% of the bees this year, but that was of the 20% that was left. That means we have low single-digit percentages of populations left. We can't find bees in Northern California in many places. There's almost none left. From Earth.com, let's look at our oceans now. Everything's falling apart, and I'll get to some core explanations of the human dilemma shortly. Bear with me. Some explanations that might make sense to many. From Earth.com, unborn dolphin calves have toxic metals in their blood, revealing horrific ocean pollution. How about the massive aluminum content in whales? Where's that coming from? They're breathing it. It's everywhere. Ubiquitous contamination. When you dump tens of millions of tons of toxic aluminum nanoparticles into the sky annually, of course they show up everywhere. And people are going about their lives like their life is going to continue much longer. It's not. It's not. Under any scenario short of some outside intervention from some unknown source, impact is imminent. More on our rapidly dying oceans from lemond.fr. Storing more carbon in the ocean, the wild gamble of marine geoengineering, another layer of insanity. As experts and businesses look for ways to rid the Earth's atmosphere of CO2, they're trying to increase the ocean's capacity to absorb carbon. That's called ocean fertilization. It's another form of geoengineering. It is going on. The solar radiation management they spray over our oceans contains elements that are used for ocean fertilization, forcing the ocean via algae blooms to uptake this CO2, acidifying our oceans, which is killing them. Dead zones, 500 plus around the world. The oceans are hurtling toward what's known as Canfield oceans. Oxygenless dead zones everywhere. Fisheries are collapsing. What a great idea. There's no explaining this insanity. I mean, literally, we're on a runaway train of it. From the UK Independent, oceans have absorbed heat of 1.7 billion atomic bombs, scientists warn. How long have I tried to bring this up on this broadcast with people that just can't assimilate it, so therefore they deny it? Now, the climate science community having to admit it, they say if we divide this by the number of seconds in 10 years, it's equivalent to about 5 atomic explosions worth of energy every single second. Let's stop there because that's not accurate. When you average out the heat buildup over 10 years, you're not disclosing the extreme acceleration, meaning that 10 years ago, we were down at 3 and 4, the thermal energy equivalent of 3 and 4 atomic bombs per second of heat building up on the planet, most of it in the oceans. Now we're at 13 or 14. How much longer can that continue? This UK Independent article, although it sounds bad, is actually masking the true severity of thermal energy buildup on the planet, and those that still deny it, because we all hate Al Gore so much that if Al Gore said it was daytime, how many people would take the position it's night because they don't want to agree with Al Gore? It's not about liking Al Gore. I don't have any love for any of the environmental anyone, because they're all denying climate engineering. But the bottom line is, it's way worse than anything Al Gore has ever stated. Our planet is broken. It's not coming back in any time frame that matters. And if we don't stop the intentional intervention with the remaining life support systems by stopping climate engineering, we're done. And I don't mean off over the horizon. It's kicking in the front door now. On that note of good cheer, you're listening to the weekly installment of Global Alert News, the Bad News Broadcast, installment number 516, June 28th, 2025. This is Dane Wigington, your host. Global Alert News is brought to you by Geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of climate intervention operations known as geoengineering. Global Alert News is aired on numerous AM and FM stations around the country. If any radio station near you is willing to air the GAN broadcast in order to inform their listeners of what Matrix Media won't mention, have them contact us at admin@geoengineeringwatch.org. We'll grant them access to our weekly broadcast files for free, of course. Recordings of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News Hour broadcast can be found on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org under the recent column and on the Dane Wigington YouTube channel. If you're on our email list, please put us on your email contact book so that our mailouts don't go to the spam files. Please help us to share the groundbreaking documentary, The Dimming, which fully exposes the climate engineering atrocities, again now with over 26 million views and rising. The best way to share, circulate the direct link to The Dimming by email directly from the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. Sharing directly helps us to overcome social media censorship. When viewing our YouTube of The Dimming or Global Alert News or any other Geoengineering Watch video on YouTube, please subscribe, share, and comment. All of that helps us to circulate critically important data to a much wider audience. To all those that are steadfastly committed to exposing and halting the climate engineering atrocities in our sky, you have my deepest gratitude now and forever. All of us can help in this battle. Start spot fires of awareness, share credible data from a credible source, ask others to do the same. If we all work together, we can push this issue to the full light of day. We can cause a shockwave around the world. Moving on. Side note from the UK Guardian. Do those in power really understand how severe and immediate our situation is? Or is their quest for power, control, and money so total that they too, except for those at the very, very top, are blind to the oncoming train? Consider This is also from the UK Guardian. Sold to the Trump family, one of the last undeveloped islands in the Mediterranean. Ivanka Trump and her husband, Jared Kushner, have spent more than $1 billion on an island that they plan to turn into a luxury resort. $1 billion. You think these people care? I don't care what political party it is, whether it's the Bidens or Trumps. I don't care. It doesn't matter. They're all meant for mass distraction. When will people figure that out? George Carlin knew, didn't he? It's a big club and we're not in it. And they think they're going to have the time to develop $1 billion island into a luxury resort? Good luck on a dead planet. Just wanted to point that out because we know from psychoanalysis of those in power and their addiction to power that there's a common thread. Quote, a near total lack of comprehension as to the consequences of their actions, even to themselves. We will never get far enough for them to ever even break ground on this insanity, wherever they got that $1 billion. From prospect.org, climate change will bankrupt the country. Maybe the country, but not those who are in positions of power, right? As we just read. From the report, climate-fueled disasters cost America almost $1 trillion over the last year, far more than economists had predicted. We knew at geoengineeringwatch.org that it was way, way worse than anything we're being told. What will it take for the population to wake up and understand without a functional environment, without a functional climate system that's being ripped apart by climate engineering operations, there is no economy. There's no environment. There's no people. That's coming. It's already unfolding. The report continues. The implications are vast, influencing everything from European weather to marine ecosystems and casting doubt on many recent climate models that underestimated this oceanic shift. Everything is exponentially worse than anything we've been told. And the power structure is doing everything they can to hide it while they're making it worse, while continuing to use the planet's life support systems as a weapon. From AsiaFinancial.com, floods swamp cities in southwest China and more storms are due. How many know this? While we're watching political theater, take the time to search online about these cities that are being swamped in China. You have to see it to believe. It looks like New Orleans did during the hurricane there so long ago. And in the U.S., devastating drought and deadly deluge, one or the other. And that is the hallmark of climate engineering operations, a totally disrupted hydrological cycle. While we're burning up and drying out in the west, further east, floods. Day after day. From MSN, 13 cities facing alarming water shortages that are being ignored. These are primarily in the west, southwest. It's going to be brutal. 40 million people, depending on the Colorado River. That's not going to sustain them for much longer. Cities like Vegas that built, was $80 million drain plug in Lake Mead to suck the last drops out to keep the circus going there. It's just insanity. All of it's insanity. No recognition of the oncoming train of total collapse by the vast majority. Moving on from the UK Telegraph, net zero technologies will backfire during heat waves. There's no net zero with any of this. It takes carbon fuel to build all of it, including solar panels, wind turbines, all of it. But they say heat pumps, electric cars, and solar panels are among the various decarbonization initiatives being pushed by the UK Energy Secretary to help the UK reach net zero by 2050. But during these extreme heat waves, they are expected to fail. No need to worry about this, especially the date. We're not going to make it to 2050 or 2040, most likely not to 2030, short of a complete course correction, which certainly doesn't seem likely at this point. And even then, few are likely to make it that long. That's how bad our situation is. Does that mean we lay down and do nothing? No. Why are we here? If we're not guaranteed a happy ending, we just lay down and do nothing? That's not an option. That's not an option. If anybody has any faith in their maker, they are expected to be at their post and doing their best to do their best until they're relieved from that post, period. And that's a life well lived. And if we all did that, in spite of the odds, and I'll get to that, who knows how much difference we could make in spite of how dark the horizon looks. From ChinaDaily.com, Chinese scientists race against time to save glaciers. Good luck with that. Again, we're back to snow enhancement. What's that mean? Chemical ice nucleation and cloud moisture. Oh no, that's a conspiracy theory, right? Chinese openly admit it. Search Chinese scientists engineer snowstorm. You'll find everybody covered it. But if you bring it up here, no, you're a conspiracy theorist. And again, that term, the final fallback of the factless and the fearful. Moving on, a few more snapshots from around the globe. From extremetemps.com, New Zealand had its hottest winter night in history earlier this month. That's a very bad harbinger. Nights are warming twice as fast as days. Very, very dire harbinger of what's coming. From CNN, Eric, the strongest hurricane to hit Mexico so early in the year, triggers deadly flooding. Eric was the first major hurricane, category 3 or greater, on record to hit Mexico before July. The hurricane maxed out as a ferocious category 4 storm. From the UK Daily Mail, terrifying video shows 10-foot waves after freak storm shook Lake Tahoe, leaving 8 dead. A sudden violent storm struck without warning, unleashing 10-foot waves, pounding hail and torrential rain that capsized their boat. It's the worst situation I've ever seen in the lake, said South Lake Tahoe Mayor Tamara Wallace. She told that to the LA Times. Question, are the ongoing global climate disruption operations a core component to all of this and so much more? How could it be otherwise? There is no natural weather at this point. It has long since been impossible to claim that any weather catastrophe would have happened in that place, at that time, in that way, if climate disruption operations had not completely derailed the entire climate system. The worse it gets, the darker the horizon grows, the more clear it becomes that there is no magic solution that allows us all to go back to Disney World vacations, Caribbean cruises, and live happily ever after. Far too many self-proclaimed activists have become anything but no activism, just deafening silence, gone from the front lines of the battle, perhaps never to return. I hope and I pray that they summon their courage and again pick up the torches of the battle. But we can't know what we can't know, can we? Whatever you believe the Creator to be, the first cause, the Great Spirit, or whatever form countless traditions teach, it's past time to communicate our desperate need for help, while at the same time doing absolutely everything in our power, given our personal circumstances and situations, to put the rubber to the road, to move forward the fight to reach a critical mass of awareness. What does biblical scripture state? Before you knew the truth, your sins were washed away. Now that you know, your sins remain. We are not allowed to sit on our backsides and do nothing. Question, why are so many petrified of their own mortality? Because too many societies and too many traditions have programmed this unwarranted fear from birth. Life is a seasonal occupation at best. Make the season count for what matters. Don't waste it on what doesn't. In the context of psychological defense mechanisms, primitive defenses are unconscious strategies used to protect against anxiety, particularly that associated with the death instinct. Defense mechanisms are among the earliest to develop in human beings, and they include mechanisms like denial, splitting, projection, and idealization. Mortality anxiety, the fear of one's own death, can trigger these defenses as individuals attempt to cope with the inherent anxieties of existence. About defense mechanisms. In psychoanalytic theory, defense mechanisms are unconscious psychological processes that shield individuals from anxiety-provoking thoughts and feelings. These mechanisms help to manage internal conflicts and external stressors, but are they helpful in the overall picture? About terror management theory. This theory suggests that individuals defend their cultural worldviews to manage the anxiety of their own mortality. The anxiety of death motivates individuals to embrace their culture's values and beliefs, even if morally indefensible, which provide a sense of meaning and purpose. Primitive defense mechanisms are characterized as more rudimentary and less mature than other defense mechanisms. They're often used in response to intense anxiety or overwhelming threats. The awareness of one's own mortality can trigger significant anxiety in individuals. This anxiety, in turn, can activate defense mechanisms in the attempt to provide psychological defenses against the feeling of vulnerability and finitude. Why do you think it's so hard for so many to face the truth? Again, as I've stated so many times on so many broadcasts over so many years, the hallmark of a truly healthy mind is an unyielding willingness to face the truth, no matter how dire. Splitting is a term many may not be familiar with. Viewing individuals or objects as either entirely good or entirely bad. Dichotomous thinking with no in-between. This can occur when someone's awareness of the potential for death and its impact on others creates intense anxiety, and thus they oversimplify people's responses to the threat or lack thereof. And with all this in mind, what is the vast majority of the human race participating in at this very moment in time, either actively or passively? Their own extremely near-term, untimely demise, planetary omnicide, due to an absolute epidemic of eyes wide shut, willful blindness and denial. From Einstein, this quote: "Two things are infinite, the universe and human stupidity, and I'm not yet completely sure about the former." Think about that. He also said this: "The difference between stupidity and genius is that genius has its limits." Yes, there you have it. As difficult a pill as it may be to swallow. Taken as a whole, the human race is behaving in a way that doesn't indicate any interest in even short-term survival on a rapidly dying planet. With weather warfare raging in our skies, bombs dropping everywhere, militaries being built up, more bombs being added to the arsenals, that is not a recipe for survival, destroying the environment along that entire path. A final pondering that again moves me to the marrow because I spent so many hours over so many years under the surface of the sea. I grew up hearing the voice of Jacques Cousteau. I watched all of his documentaries again and again. I can still hear his voice in my head, even now. From birth, Cousteau said, man carries the weight of gravity on his shoulders. He is bolted to the earth, but man has only to sink beneath the surface of the sea and he is free. And this, the sea, once it casts its spell, holds one in its net of wonder forever. Yes, this has been my fate, captured by the spell of the sea and of the forests. Both have always been my cathedral, the sanctuaries where I felt the most connected to my Maker, to whom I owe my life, many times over. Cousteau's words that will forever echo through my mind: we will only protect what we love. We only love what we understand. And we only understand what we are taught. Cousteau also said this: if we go on the way we have, the fault is our greed. And if we are not willing to change, we will disappear from the face of the globe. If the human race remains on the current course, no one gets out alive. I don't refer to a frame of millennia or centuries or even decades. Short of a complete course correction, few, if any, will see 2030, unless they are cowering in an underground bunker, which won't save them for long. Yes, the clinically insane manipulators of the Matrix will very soon be ruling over the ashes of the late great planet Earth, but they could not have done what they have done and are doing without the active or passive support of the majority population. Keep that in mind always. But not to worry, AAA says that this will be the busiest 4th of July travel weekend ever. Everything must be fine after all, right? Not so much. For far too many megacities seem permanent. They are not. Mega militaries seem the same for far too many. They also are not permanent in any way, shape, or form. Industrialized, militarized, so-called civilization certainly seems permanent to the vast majority, but such a conclusion couldn't be further from the truth. They will soon be silent monuments to the folly of the human race. All of it is circling the drain. Those that even now refuse to believe it will soon. There will be no other option. But as dark as the horizon is, by some miracle, might some remnants of the human race survive what's coming? And if so, would perspectives finally begin to change? Would understandings begin to grow? That man's war against nature was always a war against himself, a war that could only have one outcome. And yet, when all hope seems lost, again I ask, what can't we know? What creative force might there be that can, at will, defy reason, defy logic, defy all the odds? How many have seen the recent film Last Breath? It's based on a true story that most certainly defies all odds. I don't want to ruin it for those that haven't seen the film, but it's well worth taking the time. This film hit very close to home for me as I've spent, again, hundreds of hours over many years beneath the surface of the sea around the world, diving alone. I always understood the risk of habitually breaking the first and foremost rule of diving, never to go alone. But only by diving alone in my custom-made full camouflage wetsuit could I cover the expanse of the underwater world I wished to see, and often without being seen by the sea life there, so I could observe it in its natural setting and behaving naturally. It was miraculous beyond words, so much that I have seen that I could never adequately describe. And now, as it all slips away with unfolding and accelerating death in Earth's oceans, my heart is broken. The death of Earth's forests and wildlife, the same for me. But I absolutely will fight on till the brutal bitter end. I will never abandon my post, ever. And if we all stood together with absolutely unyielding resolve, who can say, who can know what forces may, in fact, come to our aid? Making your voice heard in this last hour battle for all that matters is an act of sheer will and courage, which you will never regret, ever. Check the activist suggestions link on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org for specific instructions on how you can help to move this fight forward. Face to the wind. Every single day counts. Until next week, this is Dane Wigington from geoengineeringwatch.org.